Welcome to Contractor Cuts, where we cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of growing a successful contracting company.
Welcome to Contractor Cuts. My name is Clark Turner.
I'm Jared Flo.
Thank you for joining us again. So today we are covering things that you do as a construction company, as a contractor, that is a leaky bucket to where you are actually covering costs that you should be passing on to your customers. Go ahead.
This is one of the first things that when we bring in contractors into the ProStruct Alliance, partnership, we'll go in and look at their books and look at these items and going, okay, why are you not charging for this? Why are you not charging for these items?
Yep.
You're covering that out of your profit, but those are justifiable to be put inside of a job and charged to your client.
That's right. It's usually one lump sum that we do for a lot of things as contractors to the clients. And what we want you to do is break it out to where we can start charging for the things that we're spending money on behind the scenes on those jobs.
Yep.
So let's break this down. There's really two sections that we're going to talk about. The first section is labor.
Yep.
And how do you ensure that you are charging for all the labor that you were spending on for that client? So there's really two ways that we break down the labor. The first set of labor that we want to ensure that we're pushing to the client is when we have an on-staff handyman, field service tech, or me myself. I'm doing some work. So
Right.
a lot of times when we are pricing a job, I don't think about, well, I got to run and get the cabinets, and that's 45 minutes away, so that's an hour and a half of driving. If I miss a door, that's another hour and a half to go back and get something. That's 3 hours of my time. We don't account for all of the little extras that we're spending time on. So what we like to do is, whether it's an in-house labor that I've got, whether it's my handyman, whether it's we've seen a lot of companies with these go boys that are just, they go around and do whatever they want.
Yeah. Go pick up materials and paint, and then go to the next job and pick up, cinder blocks and trash them out, and go pick up cabinets an hour and a half away, and all sorts of different stuff.
And so that guy who you're paying a salary or paying daily is running and hitting 5 different jobs. And so you're like, okay, great. We're being more efficient. We're getting these jobs done quicker. I'm getting materials on time delivered by him. He's picking up that trash at the end of the job. All these things are great, and you need them a part of keeping a smooth operating system, no problem. The issue comes in is when you're not line item charging your clients for these things. And you don't think about it until you're halfway through the job, but someone's got to go haul that trash away, right? And so you might have a haul off line item. You might have a dumpster line item. A lot of times we'll have a dumpster line item. We'll fill the dumpster. They'll take the dumpster, and then there's half a truckload left at the end of the day sitting in the garage.
It's that final walkthrough. That final, I'm gonna do the white glove finish.
Yep.
And I need somebody to walk through there and make sure that all the trash and all the boxes, and there's not that random, disposed window blind in the corner. I need them to get all of that stuff out. Well, that somebody on site walking around getting rid of that stuff costs money.
Yep. So every time that you have any sort of haul off or a dumpster on a job, make sure you put a secondary line item for a final haul off. Always put that on there, because you're going to do it. Even if you're doing it yourself, get paid for the time you're spending on that
That's
job.
Right.
That's the first thing. Finding those areas that you're spending your time on your job sites that isn't actually tied to any line item.
Well, and I think it's natural to, we've coached a lot of people that come in here, and it's just natural to look at, if I have a person that's on staff, it's going to save me money on my overhead, the cost of my doing business. It's going to save me money to have a guy that can just kind of do all of those things. A lot of times, mainly because it used to be me as the owner that did that, and I want somebody else to do that. And what it comes down to, what we've found is, at minimum, you need to be adding line items for those things in. Secondarily is what we're going into next is, we found that you're actually better off and you save more money to 1099 that versus having that in-house, because your in-house guy, there's a lot of extra ancillary costs that go into not just his salary, but the things on top of that, a trailer, a truck, a gas, and extra stuff.
So let's talk. If you've got an in-house handyman, you have 3 or 4 guys on staff that are your labor. Let's talk about how to deal with it in that perspective, and then how we prefer you to start shifting to a more of a 1099 model, and why it's more beneficial for your guys that are working for you. And we'll talk through that. So when you just have guys on staff, or you're doing the labor yourself, or you've got 3 handyman, an electrician, and a plumber that are all on staff, however you have your company set up, no matter what you're doing and how you're doing it, I'm not going to just bid line items and say, hey, customer, it's $8,000 to do this one thing. And then separately, I've got guys that I'm paying daily and hourly over here to do the work.
Right.
Instead, what I want to do is tie the amount of work that's going to be done to that line item and put a cost on it, whether it's in-house or subbed out.
Right.
I want an exact cost of the labor on that line item. Because then if I say, hey, good example, paint 3 rooms. I got my handyman, he's just going to go knock out those 3 rooms. I'm going to charge $1,000. Instead of saying, okay, I'm going to charge $1,000, my handyman can get it done in 2 days, 1 day, whatever it is. So it's going to be a wash. What I want to do is on my line item in the ProStruct 360 software is say my labor cost for this line item is going to be $500 because I'm budgeting $250 a day for this guy that's going to be out there that's on my staff.
Right.
So I'm going to have $500 for labor. I need to put $150 for materials, whatever it is, and then I'm charging $1,000.
Yeah.
Now, when I'm in the ProStruct 360 software, I take that line item, I assign it out to my staff, to my in-house labor. It doesn't put that price on it if I've set them up as a tech in
As a
my
field
company.
service tech, right?
So it's my labor, my handyman's going to get a work order with this needs to start tomorrow and needs to finish the next day.
Here's the information on the 3 rooms.
Everything
blah, blah, blah,
you
blah.
need to do. There's no pricing on it, but in the background, I'm tying that $500 to that employee. So later I can go back and look and say, okay, this guy I'm paying $60,000 a year as an on-staff labor, and I can go and say over the last 12 months
He's covered $40,000 worth of work.
he's done $40,000 worth of work. So if I would have used a sub, it would have been $40,000. I've lost $20,000 plus gas, plus insurance, plus sick days, plus all that other stuff. I'm losing on having this guy in house.
Yeah, and when you're calculating those numbers, obviously the $250 a day or whatever is what you would pay somebody to do that work if you were going to use a 1099 to do that. If you're going to be calculating how much did it cost me for this guy, I pay him a $60,000 salary, but what are the other things because he's on staff that are cost of mine as well?
Yep.
I've got gas, I've got a truck, I've got trailer, I've got maintenance, I've got all of these extra stuff. So the $60,000 might actually be $75,000 because you've got those extra costs. Then you divide that out and you're like, crap, I'm really losing money. Unless your all-in cost is $75,000 for that guy, and that guy's killing it and hitting $120,000 worth of work, right?
Work that he's doing. And you don't know that until you actually look at the numbers. And so tying all that together in your line items, we're pricing every line of how much the labor is going to cost. Even if you're doing it yourself. If I'm doing the work myself in the software, I need to get paid for my work. And I also need to get paid for my the management of the job, the landing of the client, and everything else. So if I want to get paid $500 for this work, I need to charge $750 because I need the $500 for my labor that I'm doing. I need $250 of profit for my company, right? And so that's where a lot of the one-man shows really get lost financially is, well, I could do this for $500. Sure, that's the labor part. Let's look at everything that needs to be included in this and make sure that the labor that you're paying yourself is how much you can do the work for or hire someone else to do it for. And then there's a profit above that to cover company expenses, overhead, insurance, everything that you've got to cover on the job outside of just doing the labor yourself. So,
well, and a spot of clarity on that in 2 different places. One, as a smaller company, kind of a one-man show, or you're kind of growing into a bigger company, but you're still small at this point. But you know how to put on your bags, you know how to get out there and do the work, right? A lot of times in that position, your focus is on how to help the customer out.
Yeah.
And so I can get this done for the client for cheaper if I just go out and handle this, because I don't have to pay $1,000 to a sub or somebody else to get it done. I can pay $750 and I'll just cover that additional work. Well, then you're working for free.
Yeah.
And so it is making that mind transfer of I am a company and a business, and this is the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
One of the other things, just to clarify, is we're not saying that having on staff is better or worse or is a bad idea. I think that we found that labor on site, it's better for us to 1099 it. We can control the cost and control the jobs better that way. But if you're going to have on staff people, whether it's a gopher or a painter or a plumber or whatever, know your costs.
Yeah.
Know what it costs you to do that, and make sure that you're getting a return on that money and it's worth the spend.
Well, and any large company you look at, you go to Amazon, they don't hire people because they like the person and they're a hard worker. They hire the person because they know the return that they're going to get on that investment.
That's right.
And so for our companies in construction, a lot of times it's like, my brother-in-law, he helps us out. He's really good, at what he does, and I really like him, and he needs the job, and blah, blah. That's great. Hire him for on staff. How much are you paying him, and how much actual dollars is he making the company?
Yeah.
And until that's a positive number, it's charity.
Yeah.
Give your brother-in-law cash out of your pocket instead of funding him through your company.
Well, it's viewing it from two different sides, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time is, what, I want him in here. He can help me out. What can I afford to pay?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Versus what, if I bring him in, what do I have to be able to be making off of him to make this make sense?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It's two different ways of looking at it. If I can say, well, I can afford to pay him $250 a day. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But I have no target. I have no goal. I'm going to pay him $250 a day and hope that I'm making the return on that. If you look at the other direction, what do I need to, if I bring him in, what do I need to be making? How much work does he need to be doing to make this make sense for him and for our company?
Yeah.
Right?
The other reason I really like shifting labor to 1099 is, everyone's like, well, you're mistreating those guys that want to be, that want to be loyal to you.
Get a lot of comments about that.
If I shift you to 1099 labor, I'm going to be able to pay you exactly your value. So the guy that's been doing this for 20 years that can cut in a room and paint it in 2 hours versus the 18-year-old kid that might take him all day to do it,
Right.
I'm going to pay them the same amount to paint that room.
Right.
And so the guy that's worked his butt off, knows what he's doing, has really honed his craft, and can do it really quickly, efficiently, and well the first time.
He's bringing efficiency and experience.
He's going to be making six figures.
Right.
Now, because he can knock out 5 rooms in the time that takes a new guy to do 1 room. And
Right.
so the 1099 way of, to paint this house, I'm going to pay X amount of dollars, whether it takes you 1 day or 10 days. That's how much this the value of this work is.
Right.
And so being able to shift to that, and we've talked about this before. We've had companies that have come in. One company had 9 different on-staff labor. They had from handyman, painter, electrical, and all of them were on staff. And we came in and said, listen, we're going to shift all 9 of these guys to 1099. And it was like we told them that they were, that they were sentenced to death. And so what happened is, of those 9, only 3 of them stayed with the company after 6 months.
Right.
And those 3 were all of a sudden covering the amount of work that the 9 were doing and making 6 figures and above because they were getting paid for the work they were doing. And the other 6 that didn't work anymore,
You're weeding out the fat.
it's because they went from making 60, 70, 80 a year on staff down to making 30 because they weren't doing enough work to justify that pay.
Correct.
And so this allows you to treat the guys that are treating you well, you get to pay them more money. And the guys that are taking advantage of you, they're not working for you anymore, and they can't take advantage of you anymore.
You'll very quickly see the difference in the guy that's like, this is not fair.
Yeah.
I've been with you forever. I've been doing blah, blah. This is not fair, to the other guy that says, oh, wait, so I can make as much money as I'm willing to work?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Send it.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people are like, I don't know how to organize. We helped every single one of those guys that wanted to set up their own company, their own 1099. Let's show you how to do it. Let me show you how to get rolling in your own mini company inside of ours or underneath ours. You can work for other GCs. Let me help you build your business. And by doing that, we're building our army of guys that are going to be working for us and growing their companies, which allows us to grow larger.
Creating loyalty and all that stuff.
That's right.
And we go deeper dive on that in a different podcast about how to maintain and keep vendors.
Yep.
So
that's the first area. Is labor is where you have a leaky bucket. You are eating costs not tied directly to line items that you're charging for, and so you need to ensure that everything that you're doing is tied specifically to a line item. That also allows you to say, hey, we're doing more than what we agreed upon, so I need to do a change order, right? And so I'm looking at, I got no more money in this line item. I need to do a secondary line item change order and say, hey, you also asked us to do this other thing. I've got to charge you. It's a small charge, $200. That's it. But now I'm covering the extra time I'm spending on the job site.
Yeah. Well, and another aspect of that is if you're not spending the front end time to have a detailed estimate, that's another leaky bucket,
Yep.
right? Because to do what we just talked about, you need to think about the different aspects down to at the end of the job, I'm going to need to send a guy over there, spend an hour on site to make sure that it's clean, up to the standard that we need to have, all the stuff, and trash out a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
If I don't think about that, then I'm just paying my client to death with extras over, well, I had to send this guy and this guy had to go to do this thing. So do your best to spend the time and detail out the estimate. Think through the things that need to happen that you can justify charging your client for. You're going to have ancillary extras, right? You're going to have, but in your CEA, it needs to say, these are the expectations on selections. And if you get something on site and it's not right, it's not, whatever, and we need to spend time to go back and there's extra time spent, we're going to charge you for that extra time because we've built in time based on the selections that you picked. Anything extra on top of that. So there needs to be clarity on that stuff, and when it comes to the estimate and extras that get added into it as well. So your client is not feeling you're taking advantage of them by all of a sudden you've got change orders and extras. They need to know this could and probably will happen depending on the job and how it goes.
Yeah. And one final note on exactly what you're saying with taking the time on the estimate. A lot of guys we've heard say, listen, I know how much I can charge for this, and I know how much work my guys can get done in a week. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's amazing that you have that all in your brain. You cannot duplicate that way. Yeah. You cannot grow and hire someone else to be a project manager in your company because it's all in your brain. So what we need to do is say, instead of saying, well, I know I can get $8,000 for that line item and my guys can handle it in a week and we'll be good. Let's take one more step and say, what does a week of my guys look like? And how much is that actually costing me? I'm going to put that in the ProStruct 360 software as my labor line item, and then I'm going to start being able to look at all of my numbers and teach anyone in the future that's coming in as a project manager for me or an estimator or whatever the job role that I'm hiring for is. They can now see and understand these are our set profitability. This is what we charge. This is what we pay, whether it's in-house or 1099. And you have it all organized in a systematic way to be able to train others to continue growing your business.
Yeah, I think we could talk about this aspect forever because it all builds on each other.
Yep.
By doing that, then now you're setting your employees up to be able to be more successful, but also helping you be able to hire. I don't need somebody who knows how to estimate perfectly. I've got it set up for them. Now I can hire the ethics, the character. I can find that, and then I can easily train them because estimating's done based on the line items that I've worked to build out. So it all builds on each other for the point and purpose of being able to duplicate yourself and grow your company beyond you.
One other spot that I want to mention before we move on to the second area to save money, it kind of goes along with the labor, is materials. That is a leaky bucket that a lot of times when you have grouped it with the labor, a lot of times it's like, well, I'm just going to cover it, I'm going to handle it. Separate that out because you also often forget about the caulk, the nails, all the extra stuff that you need to buy with it.
Right.
So let's line item that out and say, this is my materials for X. This is how much I'm budgeting for it. And I'm also going to, in the description, going to put, hey, your selections, I've budgeted $200 for that light fixture, but the line item is for $400 because I've got all the extras that have to go along with that light fixture, right?
That's
and so I want to make sure that I capture every single material that I'm spending and a spot that I can go back and adjust when a client has a change of what the selection is.
Yeah, and I think the more that you do that, the more that's going to hone itself in because you're in the ProStruct 360 software as your materials come in from QuickBooks. You're going to be able to balance those and look, okay, here's how much I've spent. I've budgeted, $10,000 for materials on this job. I'm at $7,500 and I'm not even halfway through. Does that make sense, right? Yeah. So that by
and I
doing
can look at
that,
all of the materials that I budgeted versus how much I've actually spent.
That's right. Yeah.
Cool. So the other spot that we wanted to cover that we haven't talked about before is we've gotten this question a lot. Do I buy equipment? How do I buy equipment? When do I buy equipment? Should I buy equipment? If I really need an excavator, I use it all the time. I need, whatever type of large, heavy equipment that you are looking to do, how should you and why should you buy it? And I think this is a really important spot where guys think they're saving money and in the long term lose a ton of cash.
Right.
And so you need to do it in a very smart and planned out way, and we're going to talk through that right now, and how you should operate once you buy that equipment. So first off, our rule of buying equipment: if you are not utilizing it 60% of the time, do not buy the equipment. We want to rent the equipment. If it's not out in the field 2 to 3 days a week being used on job sites, you should be renting your equipment, not buying your equipment. The math just works that way.
Right.
And everything we're going to talk about is going to be, you got to figure out the math behind it, and then plan for the worst, and then make sure that you can justify the purchase.
Right.
And so first off, 2 to 3 times a week that you're utilizing that equipment. If it's sitting in your shop, if it's sitting in storage for more than that, you should not own that equipment.
Right.
Now, the problem is with owning, you have fuel, you have maintenance, you have repairs, you have trailers, delivery, you have parts that you got to replace, you have insurance, you got storage, you've got financing and monthly payments and interest, you've got your credit that's being utilized where you might not be able to utilize it elsewhere to get lines of credit and other things. There's a lot of expenses that are hidden that you're not charging the client for that you do have to eat. So yeah, maybe renting a excavator is going to be more expensive. Well, I rented it 3 times this month, and that would have been the cost of the payment.
Right.
Well, that's true, but you didn't have to carry the insurance. You didn't have to carry all of this other stuff that you're doing. Now, it is going to be more expensive to rent, especially when you get using it more than 1 to 2 to 3 times a month.
Right.
Even if you're using it once a week, renting the equipment is going to be cheaper. And you say, no, it's not. It's more expensive. Trust me, what you are spending your money on when you're renting is, I can say I spent $500 for this excavator for 1 day. I can charge my client $800 for 1 day. So
Right.
I know it. I don't care about how much I've spent if I can justify the full invoice. Now, I'm going to charge $800 for that day using that excavator no matter what. So if I own it and I can lower that single day cost down to $250, $300, great, I've made $200.
Yeah.
But the delta between my outgoing expense for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days a month versus my expense of carrying the cost of that equipment, the storage, the trailering, all that stuff that you got to pay for, that is it's a very big number that ends up being on your books and your overhead.
Right.
I
think it works very similar to what we said about labor. There's 2 different ways to look at it. If I look at it, can I afford a $1,000, $1,500 a month payment with the money that I've got coming in to have the opportunity to have a skid steer, excavator, or whatever that I now own? Can I afford that? The answer may be yes, but do I understand what it actually cost me? It's not just $1,000 to $1,500. It's $2,000, $2,200, $2,300 a month that you've got to carry the cost of. How much work do I need to do to justify that kind of money going out of my company?
Yep.
Right? And so it's the 2 different ways of looking at it, that if I'm going to own one, do I have enough work and business to be able to make that make sense?
And not do I have enough work in business this month and next month, for 12 months a year, because a lot of this is seasonal work. A lot, if you're living up north and it's snowing for 3 months straight, you might not use a lot of that equipment during those months. So I need to look at a 12-month picture of what my cash flow looks like on the work that I'm doing with that, and can I justify this 12 months a year?
Yeah.
On the low months, can I still make that payment, which increases what I'm spending on the high months, right?
Right.
So that's number one. The second thing is, even if you can justify that, what is the delta between what you're spending and what you could save by buying? So if I'm saving, I'm saving $500 a month by owning as opposed to renting, because the amount of times that I use this. Great, that's $500 a month. That's good savings. The question is, how much of your time is being spent on owning the equipment versus renting the equipment? When I own equipment, I got to pick it up, I got to haul it. If something breaks, I've got to put it in the shop and rent something else while it's in the shop.
Regular maintenance.
Regular maintenance is, maintenance costs, $1,000 or $2,000 for 1,000 hours on that on some equipment, right? So those start adding up to where you might be making $500 a month, but are you actually
your net spend,
including your time
Yeah.
that you're spending on storing it, handling it, delivering it, all that stuff is not being accounted for.
Correct.
So what we want to do, let's say you decide to buy equipment and you own your equipment. Great, no problem. What I want you to do is charge your client like it's a rental, because that is how we need to justify the expense. So I am going to line item the equipment separate from the labor on this. I'm not going to say $8,000 to do your septic tank. I'm going to say $6,200 for the labor that we're doing out here, $1,800 for the equipment rental, and then I'm going to itemize that separately. And in there, if there is extended because it rained, maybe I can put into my terms, if there's an extension, it's a per day charge for the equipment, and I can increase that, though I can't increase my labor because I didn't work that day.
Right.
And so I can start charging for what I would have to pay for if it was a rental, including delivery, right? Including pickup and haul off of the equipment, stuff like that. Where, well, it's mine. I got my truck. I'm just going to go get it, so I don't have to charge for that. You should charge for that.
Charge for that.
You're spending your time. You're spending your hours. You're spending your gas. Your maintenance on your truck. There's a lot of things going into that cost that you should be justified in spending. The other thing I hate about owning equipment is that it makes it easier for me to just say, you know what, I already own it. I'm going to lower my price for this one client so I can just land this job.
Right.
It's not costing me anything for this equipment. I just need to get this job. It is costing you something for the equipment. You're now working for free for this client. So it tempts you when you're desperate for a job and you just want to land it because you want to say yes to everything. It tempts you to give that stuff away for free because I own it and it's not really costing me a lot today. But then you got to go take it in for maintenance, and it's costing you even more than the profit you made on that job.
So, I love the idea, and that it doesn't matter whether you own it or renting it. Your charge should always be, this is a rental cost. The client is renting this piece of equipment from me or from a company that I'm going to rent it from. Either way, they need to pay that cost.
That's right. So this is a math equation. People say, well, should I buy one? Should I sell what I've got? Let's run the math on it. How often is it deployed out in the field that you're making money on it? 12 months a year.
Yeah.
And can you justify 3 days a week for 52 weeks a year that you're using it? Then you probably should buy it.
Yeah.
And then even when you buy your first piece of equipment, let's say you're a septic company and you buy some excavators and whatnot. Those are deployed 5 days a week while you're doing all the septic work. Great. When I start growing and I'm bringing on a secondary job that I'm running, I'm going to rent equipment for that job. I'm not going to go rush out and buy and say, if I buy one,
2 of these.
Now I can ramp up to 5 days a week with it. No. I'm going to start with renting it because I want to be flexible with my credit, and I want to be flexible in case something doesn't work well.
I have to justify the purchase.
Yes,
right.
For sure.
I need to make sure that I can keep 5 days a week of rental steady coming in. Okay, great. That makes sense for me to buy this thing.
Yep. If you want to utilize our software for doing any of this, because a lot of this stuff you can build out preset job items, right? And so you can say, hey, my daily rental for my Bobcat, and I put my price in, and I can put quantity 1 day. This is how much I'm charging. This is the description. Every time you sit down to build an estimate, you click, boom, Bobcat rental. I put in 3 days, and it spits out the numbers of what I'm charging and what I'm doing. Our software does that for you. Yeah. So it's super simple, super quick, but it allows you to start itemizing this stuff and expediting your estimates to be able to get that bid built, sent out, and you know exactly what you're charging and exactly what your cost should be on it. So ensure you're utilizing something like that.
Well, and what happens with that is if I don't do that, then every time I'm going to estimate, if people listen and say, you know what, I'm going to start doing this and I'm going to start adding those costs into my jobs, that means that every time I go to estimate a job, I'm having to stop and think through, okay, how much does that thing cost me? How much is the gas? How much? Okay, I'm going to charge X amount, right? If I've pre-built a line item, I spend the time to think through the details of it, spell out the description and information in there, and then it's done. Then the next time, all I do is 3 days, 5 days, 10 days of rental, plug it in there, and it's done.
Yep, that's right. That is it. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week.
See ya.